My, my major, well, hard to say major, but one of the theses I was thinking about is that the general model of conspiracy theories can be used for explanation of infodemic. So most of things we have seen during Corona crisis in last, say, 9 months actually was nearly the same like most of conspiracy theories we have seen earlier. And the second one is that it's very hard to say if we are thinking about a conspiracy theory, who did it and why. So I was trying, to think about if any country or if any person, if any organization of any alien or any artificial intelligence, who did it? Okay, I'll try to make, some balance, but I couldn't. So I think it's probably the most important question. Why should China do it? Because it also cost them, why North Korea did it. There are so many theories about that. Then why Soros? Why Gates? Why? I mean, money. Probably most of these people do not need any money. Power, I don't think so. So, okay, so that was probably some of thinkings I was trying to do. Okay, so first let's see a little bit about infodemic. So it has been said that COVID-19 was spreading around very, very fast, but the only thing which was even faster was, was misinformation or fake information about COVID-19, because it was really moving around and spreading around, whatever you want to call it. And it was very hard to keep the pace with this. I was trying, to at least to download a couple of interesting, articles and interesting other texts, but, very soon, I got more than 100 or more than 200 different fake texts about COVID, so I stopped actually. What is this infodemic? I'm using this term. So it's actually that you have big quantity of information about some problem, and usually you cannot state where is the truth, which is reliable, which is not. And of course, it's much harder to find solution you actually need. So there are a couple of myths you can myths which are connected with infodemic or with corona, So it's just a common cold. Trump and some other people were talking like this 6 or 7 months ago. So virus was done in a lab. Kids cannot catch it. Corona is less deadly than a flu. Vitamin C will stop it. It's not safe, through post to get a package from China. You can drink bleach and other disinfection, and you can protect yourself. About 400 people actually have been poisoned of drinking, some bleaches and some other disinfections. So in this region, Balkan, especially in Serbia, for example, then they said you can drink a lot of alcohol, you can drink garlic, and of course you are completely safe from coronavirus. Well, also in some parts of Croatia, I believe also maybe you can just add some, prosciutto and some cheese, and that's it. You are completely safe. Okay, so then about masks, then some other problems. So it has been really a lot of things. So we have seen a lot of new words like info hygiene, herd immunity, post-truth, new normality, dictatorship, nostalgia, whatever, pandemic. It was interesting, this video called Plant Dynamic was took out from Twitter, but it was already seen 8 million times before it was taken out. So, but as usually, this misinformation about Corona was causing panic, anger, and so on, as all misinformation especially target marginalized groups with threats, violence, and whatever. In the beginning, I think for myself, I tried to state these 5 W questions in the situation for Corona. So, where? So this classic W question: where virus was produced, how it was released to the public, when it was diagnosed, what actually is disease, rules of transmission, why it attacks some, why it spares some, who is behind this pandemic, lab in China, US military, Bill Gates, whatever, and why. Of course, the last question, but the most important, is why. Why should somebody, you know, release, if I can say, this virus, and waiting what's going on? As I said, you can analyze it together, you know, conspiracy theories, conspiracy ideology, together with Corona-19 misinformation. Mostly in conspiracy theories, it's quite very few which are so-called positive, which are talking about things we should do or we should know. Most of them are negative, so there is a hate is to somebody, to some organization, to some deep state. So there is never love or affirmative approach connected with conspiracy theories. Then, of course, conspiracy theories very often show the greatest interest in the craziest theories, you know, this flat earth, for example, people never have been in the moon, everything is actually fake, so whatever. When you look at this crazy conspiracy theories, then you see, you know, that about between 10 and 12% of people actually believe that nobody was on the moon, that Earth is flat. So you cannot think about 10% of people or 12% of people who are thinking, you know, that sea is going like this after flat Earth and coming back, whatever. Unbelievable, you know. Unfortunately, people do not understand everything. They don't understand, and then, of course, it's a field for conspiracy theories. So, pyramids, Stonehenge, flying saucers, and there are, you know, monsters, distant lakes, you know, mountains, and so on and so on. People do not understand what's going on, and then, of course, there are conspiracy theories. And if you see the major, you know, theories about Corona or Infodemic, then you could see the problem of anti-vaxxers, so vaccination, of course, it is the reason for autism, whatever. Then, of course, they are going, you know, if you go, like, I'm not going to mention a couple of celebrity names in Croatia, but they said, you know, if you get, you know, vaccination, you are going to get a chip inside, you know, together with vaccine, so you can imagine how this chip should be, you know, 0.5 millimeter or whatever, and you are receiving it through vaccination. Then, of course, as I said, Gates and Soros are guilty because Gates was talking about problems of pandemics like 3 or 4 years ago. He said that it's a major problem in the world. So they said, you see, the guy was talking about it, and he did it, you know, after 3 years, you know. That was, you know, how people think about it. Then there are, of course, if you watch TV, you know, there are also like people who are thinking about flat earth, so there are people who say, God, it doesn't exist. There is no such, you know, thing in the world, you know. Show me one person who has it. Of course, it's hard to say he is in isolation or in hospital, so how you can show it, you know. So there are always, you know, this, if you have some polls, you see, you meet people who think it doesn't exist. Then there is media manipulation, how decisions are made. There are various medicine which can help. Then, of course, it's 5G problem. I think especially in the UK, in some European countries, you know, there are a lot of masts have been destroyed of 5G, like 30, I think only in UK, like between 30 and 40 have been destroyed, you know, masts for, you know, for transmission of 5G. Also in Belgium, Holland, and some other countries, I think. And of course, there is always question about deep state, so there is always something down, you know, which is, you know, pulling all the roles, and we are just, you know, people who can do anything because state is actually doing with us. So it was, you know, tradition that you present reality like chain of causes and consequences, but it's not always so easy. If you cannot present yourself in this logical series of choices, then of course you feel that you are stuck facing with surprising and unforeseen consequences and so on. And of course, one of the problems was that really, you know, from the side of science and from the side of government, it hasn't been always completely clear information what's going on, you know, because things have been changed, you know, masks are okay, masks are not okay, you know, you should keep distance 2 meters, you should, you know, you should not go, you know, in you know, stores, in the shopping malls, and after 9 months they found that less than 100 people actually have been infected in shopping malls, you know, with the COVID. Much more have been infected, you know, on weddings, on some church ceremonies and some other things. So, I mean, there is no, you know, clear explanation what's going on, and of course, it's always a situation that you have things you just don't know what's going on. So if there is, you know, flying saucer or some alliance there or not, and whatever, you know. Very often you just feel, you know, powerless, and in these times, and you cannot find answers to all questions you see around. You cannot, you know, state what's going on. And of course, so maybe it's easy just to think about conspiracy which is going around. And that's, of course, the reason what is going on. There are people, as we have seen, you know, that Lemuria or Atlantis is real or were real, Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, they exist. But government is covering information, but everything but about a flying object and some other situation. And of course, it's frustrating. And finally, it says it's not problem what the people believe. It's problem that people believe. And that satisfaction is much more important than truth of falsity. It's questioned in the Trump situation also. So you can you know, go into past, you know, to discuss about genealogy, development of such theories. You know, it has been already, you know, in 19th century when science and religion, you know, just split. But of course, it happened much more. You know, things usually are going like this. It's not going to happen to us, you know. Well, we are safe, you know. And then you see papers, phone, you know, everything, turntable, books, whatever, you know. So things are coming and things are happening. So somewhere in between is, of course, our lives are controlled by plots. Somebody did it in secret places. We think, or sometimes we think or we believe that we live in democracy, but of course there is always a small group of people who are running everything. We don't know who they are, And whenever something happens, this is the secretive group. Maybe in the future, artificial intelligence will generate more and more content, will become more and more sophisticated, and it should be increasingly difficult to differentiate from the content which is created by humans. And then, of course, it's going to be maybe more and more disinformation, misinformation, and so on. There are some, people who tried, to make some methodology about conspiracy theory, like contradiction, obsession, secrecy, counterfeiting, overflow of facts, conspiracy, inconspiracy, gullibility, exclusion of randomness factor, and Q bono, to whom it benefits. So it's always probably the last place, but probably the most and most important. So I said on the beginning, who should be, who should be guilty, for example, who should be this famous why, who should benefit from it, in whose interest it should be. So in some way, I am making my own conspiracy theories. As I said, let's see countries, China. Well, pandemic almost destroyed the world economy. So usually GDP was down 12, 15%. Indirect damage is very hard to estimate, but it was even economic downturn in China also. Was it just a sacrifice because China returned relatively quickly to earlier GDP growth rates? But it's still hard to think about. USA, enormous medical costs, larger number of deaths, unemployment, huge money for state aid. Of course, in US, it's quite easy. You have a printing machine and you can print, a lot of money, and then you are just going, in trillions down, of state debt, whatever. But still, it's hard to believe because there is some political cost to Trump also. Third country, it's hard to say. North Korea is too weak, of course, to produce something and to spread it. Persons, Gates, Soros, and somebody else, organization like Bilderberg, Trilateral, Illuminati, Freemasons, Club of Rome, whatever, is some organization strong enough. Alliance, it has been some, news that one meteor came, on the Earth, and it has been, some virus on the meteor, but nothing else. Artificial intelligence, of course, not yet enough strong. And finally, you see that only somebody who actually got more and more money were companies, Amazon went, into both, Jeff Bezos and Amazon went to, what, trillion of dollars worth, Apple, Google, Facebook. So only this couple of companies actually got some money, but I don't think that we should say that companies are guilty for launching, COVID viruses. So, it's really hard to say it. So that's my own conspiracy theory, and I really couldn't find, the answer why. So it's not a question of who, but why should somebody do it? Okay, that's it. Thank you. I tried to be very, very short, as you can see. Just pass through.
Didn't work.
You were sleeping, I know.
Thank you, Professor Prelog. If you will just stop sharing your presentation. And now we can move to questions.
If there are some.
I have to say I have one question because it is regarding maybe every presentation that's been going on this morning, even in this concept of truth, or even if it has to do something with the with the perception of the and the slightly the different media usage during the pandemic, because people were looking more from the were looking for information they wanted, they couldn't get. There was in my own presentation were several proofs that, you know, the media usage slightly changed. I mean, people were more they were informing themselves on social media and the TV mostly, and they kind of, there was a slight shift between informing themselves in the international media diet pre-pandemic and during the COVID. People, and there were actually, for example, in Croatian case, lots of people were over 50% in Croatia. There was a phenomenon of active avoidance of the news. So it meant that people were actually on purpose were avoiding the news. But during the pandemic, according to the Reuters media usage survey, but during the pandemic, people were back to the local. When I say local, I mean national media outlets, especially TV and the social media and news portals. And of course, as Professor Prelog said, I mean, you know, there are different informations out there on the internet, and people were, as we know from the previous studies, they simply, or they are not that interested, or to see which news is actual I don't know, facts, proven facts. They're just, you know, they have to fulfill their need to amuse themselves, to inform themselves, and sometimes the first information available seems interesting. But there is, of course, also topic of discussion. So that was merely a comment. I don't know if some of you have other experiences during the COVID crisis. Okay, if we don't have any questions, okay, yeah, Angelina, here, there you go. Sorry.
Thanks for your presentation. In fact, you said that science is a true belief with a justification. But now, here with the COVID, with the pandemic, science gives only belief and not yet justification. It fails to explain what is happening exactly with the coronavirus. Do you think it could explain why science and this belief conspiracy theory are at the same level for some people?
You have to unmute yourself. Professor Beschker is already complaining like he cannot hear you, and answer. And repeat your questions, please.
Okay, I will repeat my question. So I say, in philosophy, we say that science is a true belief with justification. But here with the coronavirus, science gives only belief, but fail to explain and to give justification for to explain the epidemic. So I wonder if it could be explained why science and conspiracy theory are at the same level for some people, maybe not.
Maybe I can just shortly comment on this question. I mean, see. Okay. Things which I am, you know, crazy about is when you watch, you know, Minister of Health, or we call it, you know, some group of people, they call themselves, you know, what we should say, like staff for this coronavirus. There are ministers, there are people, epidemiologists, whatever. What do they say? You know, they say on TV or, you know, the major TV programs, we believe, we expect. So you cannot think about science that the main way of communication of somebody who is in science, whatever. Epidemiology is also science, you know, it's a branch of medicine, so it should be a science. But, you know, they say, well, we expect next week, you know, number will go down, or it will be the same, or it will go up. You know, that's the way how people who are professors of medicine, you know, in different fields, or ministers of health, whatever, how they call it. So if you have this system, then science, okay, let's say it's a new phenomena, so it's really hard to understand completely, even for the scientists, because for example, there are a couple of you know, major scientists here in Croatia who are, you know, members of academy, directors of institutes around, and they're not completely, you know, together on the same idea. So I mean, if you think like this, and if you see ordinary people, you know, who doesn't have, you know, college, who got, you know, how we call it, you know, 2.5, you know, classes of, you know, second of high school, whatever, or even less, if he is looking, you know, what they are talking, so it's quite natural to expect, you know, that he is developing for himself. Well, you see, they don't know, probably they know, but they don't want to explain to us. I mean, so in some way, you know, science is also guilty in some way for development of conspiracy theories. So, I mean, we could, you know, talk about this maybe for hours, but I think it's one of the reasons. Okay. Okay, Nomad, we are through here.
Okay. Thank you very much. If there are no further questions and no objections, I conclude the program of our conference for today, and I actually am opening a discussion of the next conference topics. And so as Mato and me already started the discussion, there are a lot of interesting topics, but there is one great unknown, and that is what the situation with the international health with the pandemic and the COVID, what the situation will be like. I mean, if because the people are divided in two parts, like optimists and the pessimists. And the pessimists said that there will be at least 3 or 4 years till the whole thing clears off. And the optimists, of course, say that we will be going back to normal next year, and that the pandemic won't be even a topic in the information sector. So, but it is the practice of International University Center that we have to give topic for the next year. So if you have any ideas how to play it safe, somewhere in the middle, down the that we can, because if there will be still an ongoing pandemic, then, you know, it would clearly affect our topic, and because most of the research and most of the stuff that people will be concerned about is the effect that the pandemic has on the communication of the political processes And if not, it is really, as we were discussing yesterday, that for a month, at least in Croatia, during the summer season, there was all of a sudden no pandemic. No one was discussing it. So it was just like it disappeared for a month. And
you have to mention the election and the early season.
Yeah, and during the election time, as Professor Prelog just said, without unmuting himself. And so I opened discussion on this topic. So if you have we have a discussion from Professor Beschker, and I will unmute him to.
He's always angry.
No, he is not here. He just left. But he left a topic for, he said, media on crisis and crisis of media. What the IT does, or
it might be for a conference, but not for a workshop.
No, the workshop itself, it will probably have, will get a name in different.
Yeah, okay. So well, it's general, you know, like always we do it a conference like the general. You know, just a comment what you were talking about.
I didn't left, the host left me. I really cannot see him.
No, you know how pessimists called optimists? Well, they don't know the whole truth. These are optimists.
You are kindly asked to unmute yourself, Professor Beschker.
Oh, he is there still. Okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. Well, I've heard and
just
seen everything.
Just a sec. We can't hear you just yet. Now.
Yes, I've heard and seen everything. So it was not a problem for me, and I'm not trying to confuse you with my chats. But there are some chats of mine, especially one to Eva. Now, well, I think that the crisis, not only the health crisis, but the health, economic, and political crisis should be a topic of the next year too, because I don't see the end of these crises till the end of 2021. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think not. Even with the vaccine, to vaccinate 7 billion of people, we will spend all the next year. So we will have a couple of crises, a bunch of crises next year, even stronger than this year. That's what I think. Therefore, I offer this theme: media on crisis and crisis of media, and of course what the information technology does. Now you can refine this this title of the topic. But of course it's not the only proposal that can be made. Go ahead.
No, I for one completely understand your proposal. Anyone else?
Or maybe just add something, you know. I had to. Yes. Oh, somebody is still
No.
okay. I mean, let's see another problem with very few people are talking about. You know, there are many comments. You know, what's the price of, you know, for economy of some type of lockdown? You know, so you know, whatever, you know, bars have to close at 12 o'clock. So some other, you know, public spaces, you know, have to close earlier, whatever. So it's huge price, whatever. But nobody's comparing, you know, to the price of health system, you know. So because if you have, not institution, but the places where you have more people, you know, in hospital, you know, the price of hospital system, the price of, you know, medicine and everything else. So of course here you cannot have a real price, but you know, in some countries like US, you know, cost of somebody who spent 2 weeks in the hospital is $200,000, you know, everything together. I mean, medicine, you know, healthcare, maybe respirator, whatever. So it's huge money. So it's very hard to compare, you know, two different types of costs. You know, one is cost of slowing down your economy. It has a cost. Okay, but another cost is a cost of health system, and maybe, you know, cost of human lives. You know, it's always question, you know, for Sweden, what was real cost of situation in Sweden with what was 6,000-7,000 deaths in a month or 2 months, you know. So it was also cost of this. I mean, you cannot say, you know, everybody, you know, over 65, you know, kill him or leave him, you know, to get COVID. Well, nobody, I believe, at least publicly, is not going to say it, but maybe, you know, in some approaches, it has been actually the situation. So they are actually, you know, receiving, you know, their retirement income, so they do not produce health. Already they are spending, you know, health resources. No, I'm too black, you know. I'm not going to talk more like this. But I mean, I'm just saying, you know, that we are always talking. So I'll be just one sentence. We are always talking about just one side, whatever, you know, one side of the problem. Nobody is talking about the balance of different costs of whole situation, of whole pandemic, or whatever you want to call it. So, I mean, there are a lot of protests, especially, you know, I don't know, probably in Spain are the biggest protests, but also sometimes in France, sometimes in London, whatever. So we don't want to have masks. There is no problem. We want to have, you know, bars. We want to have people on the stadiums and whatever, you know, there are protests. But I mean, who is going to pay it, you know? So it's always question. Here in Croatia, one of the problems, as I already said, was a question of weddings. Probably you don't know this situation, but here, you know, good wedding is 500 people at least, you know. So especially in the rural, you know, areas. So 500 people who are after 3, 4, 5 hours drunk, you know, they're, you know, kissing, they're, you know, dancing, there are different so games for weddings. So after such big wedding, there are always, you know, 30, 40 people who are infected, you know. In the meantime, you know, it has been, you know, decision that wedding can be whatever, 50 people maximum, not more. Then, of course, all people who are expecting, you know, and interesting, not a male, but girls actually say, well, you cannot, you know, you can not do it for us. I'm waiting for this wedding, you know, for years and years. Well, maybe not years, but at least you have to organize at least a year in advance, you know, and you already, you know, invited 500 people. So how you can say 450 people are not coming, you know? So it's completely crazy. I mean, but at the same time, if you do it and then you see that 50 people are infected, and at least, you know, 10 will go to the hospital, 5 will go maybe to respirator, 2 or 3 will die, whatever, as the result of this type of wedding. I mean, balance is a huge problem.